Cody Brown keeps asking, where is the loyalty? But what if the real story is about a son who answered that question with total silence? What really happened between Cody and Logan that led to a digital wall no one saw coming? Was it just distance, or was it a powerful boundary that changed the entire Brown family forever? Stay with me, because what we are about to uncover goes far beyond what aired on TV. And if you love deep dives that expose the untold side of reality drama, make sure you hit subscribe right now, because on this channel, we tell the stories they do not want you to hear. Cody Brown once looked into the camera and demanded to know where the loyalty had gone. And for years, that question echoed through living rooms across America as viewers watched the unraveling of a family that once prided itself on unity. But what if the real story is not about children forgetting to call their father? What if it is about a silence so intentional, so measured, that it changed the entire power structure of the Brown family forever? Because beneath the televised frustration and the carefully edited confessionals, there are whispers of a deeper shift, a quiet turning point centered around Logan, the firstborn, the steady one, the son who grew up faster than he should have and carried responsibilities that were never truly his to bear. From the earliest seasons of Sister Wives, Logan was portrayed as the reliable anchor in a sea of chaos. While the adults navigated complex relationships and constant moves, he was often the one helping with younger siblings, cooking breakfast, managing schedules, and stepping into a role that blurred the line between child and caretaker. Viewers saw his maturity and praised it, but maturity born from necessity can leave invisible scars. And as he transitioned into adulthood, leaving home, pursuing higher education, building a stable career, and eventually marrying Michelle, he seemed to be crafting a life intentionally different from the emotional turbulence that defined his upbringing. And that difference may hold the key to understanding the present silence, because when someone works hard to create calm, they become far less willing to invite chaos back in, even if that chaos comes from a parent. The public narrative suggests a father waiting by the phone, lamenting that his children no longer reach out, describing holidays without calls, birthdays without messages, and conversations that never happen. Yet there is another perspective circulating among longtime observers and insiders who claim that the silence did not appear out of nowhere. They suggest that over time, phone calls became less about connection and more about confrontation, less about genuine curiosity and more about loyalty tests. Conversations purportedly shifted from casual check-ins to intense discussions about family conflicts, about rules, about allegiances. And when adult children expressed independence, it was sometimes interpreted as betrayal. Imagine being a grown man, balancing work, marriage, and personal growth, only to receive calls that pull you back into unresolved family disputes. Imagine feeling that every interaction carries emotional weight, that every response might be scrutinized and interpreted through a lens of loyalty versus defiance. Eventually, even the most patient person can reach a breaking point, and according to persistent theories, that breaking point came after a particularly heated exchange where Logan allegedly refused to take sides in ongoing conflicts and made it clear that he would not be drawn into arguments between his parents. That stance may have been met not with understanding, but with frustration, possibly even accusations about respect and devotion. And in that moment, something fundamental shifted. Because when a son who has spent years mediating finally decides to step away, the impact is profound. What followed was not a dramatic on-camera explosion. It was quieter, more controlled. Some believe Logan began screening calls, letting them go to voicemail, replying minimally, if at all, choosing brevity over debate. And then, as tensions continued and messages purportedly grew more charged, he may have taken the final step, blocking the number entirely. The concept, often discussed in psychological circles, of limiting engagement with someone who thrives on emotional reaction comes to mind, becoming unresponsive, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation, removing oneself from a cycle that no longer feels healthy. And And while none of this has been publicly confirmed, the pattern aligns with what viewers have witnessed: a growing divide, a series of strained interactions, and a father increasingly vocal about perceived abandonment. What makes this situation especially compelling is the symbolic weight of silence in a family dynamic that once revolved around one central authority figure. When communication ceases, the control shifts. No longer can one person dictate the emotional climate. No longer can calls be used to initiate conflict or demand validation. Instead, there is a digital wall, an invisible boundary that cannot be crossed without permission. And boundaries, when enforced consistently, can feel shocking to those unaccustomed to them. Imagine dialing a familiar number and hearing nothing but an automated message. Imagine sending a text and never seeing confirmation that it arrived. That absence becomes a statement louder than any argument. And for someone whose identity is deeply tied to being needed, being consulted, being obeyed, such absence can be disorienting. Yet from another angle, it can represent growth. A young man choosing stability, choosing peace, choosing to protect the life he has built rather than revisiting patterns that drained him in the past. And this is where the human element deepens, because beyond headlines and fan theories, there are real emotions involved. There is a son who may have wrestled with guilt before making his decision, who likely weighed memories of childhood warmth against recent tension, who understood that stepping back would not be easy, but felt necessary. And there is a father who experiences the sting of distance, perhaps interpreting it as rejection rather than reflection. The tragedy of such situations lies in misaligned narratives, one side seeing independence as self-care, the other seeing it as disloyalty. And without open dialogue, those narratives harden over time, turning temporary distance into long-term separation. Viewers have also noticed the evolving role of Janelle in this dynamic, as someone who appears calm, measured, and protective of her children. If communication truly must pass through her, it signals a reversal of traditional hierarchy. It suggests that adult children now choose their points of contact carefully, that access is earned, not assumed. And while this may feel humiliating from one perspective, it can also be seen as a natural progression. When children grow into autonomous adults, autonomy means deciding who has direct influence over your daily life. Autonomy means evaluating. A low public profile avoids fueling online drama and focuses on career and marriage rather than televised conflict. That restraint itself speaks volumes, because in an era where oversharing is common, choosing silence can be an intentional act of dignity. And perhaps that is the most compelling aspect of this unfolding story. It is not driven by explosive confrontations, but by steady resolve, not by harsh words, but by withheld ones. And as each holiday passes and each milestone is celebrated quietly, the message remains consistent. Life continues, growth continues, and peace becomes its own reward. For longtime viewers, the shift feels seismic because it challenges the very foundation of the show, which once centered on collective identity and shared decision-making. Now, individual paths take precedence, and while that evolution may be painful, it is also realistic. Families change, children mature, perspectives shift, and sometimes relationships require recalibration. Whether reconciliation will occur remains uncertain, because meaningful repair demands vulnerability, accountability, and mutual willingness to listen without defensiveness. And those qualities are difficult to cultivate under public scrutiny. Yet, hope often persists in the smallest gestures: a sincere outreach, a private conversation, a moment of acknowledgement that prioritizes understanding over pride. Until then, the silence stands, not as a weapon, but as a boundary, not as punishment, but as protection. And for many watching this story unfold, it resonates on a deeply personal level because it mirrors experiences beyond reality television, experiences of learning to differentiate between obligation and choice, between inherited roles and self-defined identity. And perhaps that is why this chapter captivates audiences. It is not merely about one family, it is about the universal tension between loyalty and well-being, between tradition and growth, between the past that shaped us and the future we strive to create. And as we continue to observe the Brown family navigate this new terrain, one truth becomes clear. Silence can carry pain, but it can also carry power. And sometimes, the most human decision a person can make is to step back, breathe deeply, and choose a life that feels whole, even if that choice leaves unanswered calls echoing in the background. As the distance settled in and the rhythm of missed calls became the new normal, the emotional landscape of the family quietly transformed, because silence does not simply remove noise, it exposes what remains when the noise fades. And in this case, what remained was a series of uncomfortable realizations about identity, authority, and accountability. For years, the image presented to the world was that of a devoted patriarch, struggling to keep a large, complex family unified under challenging circumstances. Yet, the unfolding reality suggests something far more layered. A story of adult children reassessing their childhood experiences through the clarity of maturity and asking themselves difficult questions about what they are willing to accept moving forward. Logan, as the eldest, carries a unique perspective. He remembers the early days before television fame, before public scrutiny, before the fractures widened. He remembers shared homes, shared sacrifices, and the promises of equality that were foundational to the family structure. And when those promises appeared to erode over time, particularly in ways that seemed to favor one household over others, the emotional impact would not have been small. Because children notice patterns, even when they do not articulate them immediately. They notice who receives time, who receives patience, who receives financial stability, and who receives criticism or distance. And when those patterns repeat over years, they shape beliefs about worth and belonging. So when Logan allegedly reached a point where he felt continued engagement would only reopen old wounds, his decision may not have been impulsive, but cumulative, the result of countless moments stacked one upon another until the weight became undeniable. And in stepping back, he may have discovered something liberating, that peace is not passive, it is active. It requires boundaries, it requires consistency, and sometimes it requires disappointing people who expect unlimited access. This shift also rippled outward to siblings who had been navigating their own strained interactions, each of them processing disappointment in different ways, some through emotional conversations, some through public expressions, some through private withdrawal. But Logan's approach stood out because it was quiet and final. It suggested that argument was no longer productive, that explaining feelings repeatedly without change only prolonged exhaustion. And in that example, others may have found validation, not encouragement to sever ties recklessly, but reassurance that prioritizing mental health is not betrayal. The conversation then expands beyond one father and one son into a broader reflection on generational change. Many adult children today are redefining what loyalty means, moving away from unquestioned obedience toward mutual respect. And when that shift collides with traditional expectations, conflict can feel inevitable, because one side views independence as maturity, while the other may interpret it as rejection. Yet growth rarely aligns perfectly with comfort, and the pain that accompanies shifting roles can be profound. Imagine a father accustomed to being consulted on every decision, realizing he is no longer the central reference point. Imagine confronting the possibility that authority must evolve into influence earned through trust rather than assumed through title. Such transitions require humility, and humility is challenging under any circumstance, but especially under the spotlight of reality television, where pride and narrative intertwine with public perception. The cameras capture reactions, the interviews amplify grievances, and viewers analyze every expression. Yet the most significant conversations likely occur off-screen, in quiet living rooms, or not at all. And therein lies the tension, because without transparent dialogue, assumptions solidify into beliefs, and beliefs into barriers. The alleged digital blockade symbolizes more than technological distance. It represents a psychological boundary, a recognition that constant exposure to unresolved conflict can erode even the strongest bond. And when someone who once played mediator decides to disengage, it forces others to confront their own roles in the cycle. It raises questions about how communication has been handled, how disagreements have been resolved, and whether empathy has been evenly distributed. From a human perspective, the situation is heartbreaking because beneath the speculation, there is a simple truth: relationships matter. Fathers matter, sons matter, and the longing for connection does not disappear easily, even when distance feels necessary. Logan likely did not arrive at his decision lightly. He likely revisited childhood memories, weighed present realities, and considered future consequences. He likely understood that silence would speak loudly and that it might be misunderstood. Yet sometimes clarity demands courage, and courage often looks like stepping away from what drains you, even if others cannot yet see why. And on the other side, a father may feel bewildered, replaying conversations, searching for the moment things shifted, wondering how to bridge a gap he never intended to create. The tragedy of miscommunication is that intentions and impact rarely align perfectly. One person believes they are enforcing standards, the other feels criticized. One believes they are asking for loyalty, the other hears conditional love. And when those interpretations diverge repeatedly, trust frays slowly, then suddenly, and rebuilding, that is the key: choice. Reconciliation is rarely automatic. It requires deliberate effort from everyone involved. It requires recognizing that love and accountability are not opposites, but partners. And until such recognition takes root, the quiet will persist, steady, unwavering, not as punishment, but as proof that boundaries once set can endure. And for Logan, that endurance may symbolize something deeply personal: a break from patterns that no longer serve him, a commitment to the stable life he has built, and a reminder that adulthood grants the freedom to decide which voices shape your daily reality and which remain at a distance. And while the unanswered calls may continue to echo, they also carry a message. Growth changes relationships, and sometimes the most compassionate act you can offer yourself is to honor that change, even when it alters the script you once believed was permanent. So, in the end, this is not just a story about missed phone calls. It is about boundaries, consequences, and the quiet power of choosing peace over chaos. Whether you see Logan's silence as heartbreaking or heroic, one thing is clear: the family dynamic has changed forever. If you want more deep dives that go beyond the surface and break down the real story behind the headlines, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join our community, because we are just getting started.